Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Marco Nuyen and I'm a trainer at Microsoft. This video is part of a series of videos about the role of a Microsoft cybersecurity architect. In this video, we will have a look at Zero Trust, the fundamental concept behind all our efforts as a cybersecurity architect. Discover the essentials of Zero Trust and learn how this powerful security framework shapes the priorities and practices of Microsoft cybersecurity architects in today's ever-evolving digital landscape. The content of this video is mostly aligned with the area of attention, security best practices and priorities from a certification perspective. Now, why Zero Trust? That is what you are here for to find out. What is it? Let us get started with some thinking, a question. What's the main goal of Zero Trust? A. To eliminate the need for firewalls and encryption. B. To verify the identity and security of every request and resource. C. To reduce the cost and complexity of IT infrastructure. The answer is B. The core principle of Zero Trust is to never trust, always verify. This means that every request and resource should be authenticated, authorized, and encrypted regardless of where they originate from or where they are located. Zero Trust aims to minimize the attack surface and prevent unauthorized access or data breaches. And for A, yes, we will do firewalls and encryption. These are important elements in our toolbox. And for C, yes, we need to think about the cost. The cost needs to be balanced. We will spend more on elements of high risk for which we need to make a risk acceptable. And in other videos I've said that it helps to bring elements back to risk statements. But some cost is to be expected. While I'm mentioning this, I realized I also need to say something here about complexity. Avoid it. Less is more. Things do not get more secure if you add complexity. Think of terms like minimal viable product or skeleton crew. What's the minimum which has the most impact? But let's move forward to Zero Trust itself. What is Zero Trust? What are the three principles and what are the 6 pillars of Zero Trust, plus one other element? And how can we combine them together? But we also need to discuss how to apply Zero Trust in our efforts as a cybersecurity architect. Today's organizations need a new security model that more effectively adapts to the complexity of the modern environment. A model that embraces the hybrid workplace and protects people, devices, apps, and data wherever they are located. We need that since we often do not have to control over the location. Think of working from home or an internet cafe. The security model that can be conceived for this could be called Zero Trust. A Zero Trust approach should extend throughout the entire digital estate and serve as an integrated security philosophy and end-to-end strategy. The foundation of Zero Trust was laid by the efforts of the Jericho Forum, which was later brought under the wings of the Open Group. Zero Trust intends to be able to adapt to complexities of a modern environment that embraces the mobile workforce and protects user accounts, devices, applications, and data wherever they are located. With Zero Trust, we move away from a trust by default perspective to a trust by exception one. Microsoft develops services and products with a Zero Trust mindset. Microsoft defines Zero Trust as a proactive, integrated approach to security that applies to 3 core principles. These are across all the layers of our digital estate. And those core principles are assume breach, verify explicitly, and least privilege. But we should never lose sight of why we do security, why we apply Zero Trust. We do it to enable our business, to make sure our company, our users, and our processes can continue without interruption. If things are good, they are good. But if there's an indication of things not being good, then we act. It's thinking like this that is facilitated by Zero Trust. Let's dig a little bit deeper. The 3 principles of Zero Trust, assume breach, verify explicitly, and least privilege, are based on the idea that security should not depend on static or implicit factors, such as network boundaries or trust relationships, but rather on dynamic and explicit factors, such as identity verification and context-aware policies. These principles aim to reduce the risk of unauthorized access or data leakage, as well as to improve visibility and control over the network environment. The 3 principles are not mutually exclusive, but rather complementary and interdependent, forming a holistic approach to achieving zero trust. Verify explicitly. This means that every request for access or data should be authenticated, authorized, and encrypted, regardless of where it originates from or where it is going. No source or destination should be trusted by default, and security policy should be enforced at a granular level. For example, using certificates and multi-factor authentication to verify the identity of users and devices, and applying encryption and segmentation to protect data in transit and at rest. Least privilege. This means that every user, device, and application should have the minimum level of access and permissions needed to perform their function, and nothing more. This reduces the attack surface and minimizes the potential damage of a breach. For example, using role-based access control and just-in-time provisioning to limit the scope and duration of access, and applying micro-segmentation and firewall rules to isolate and restrict network traffic. Assume breach. This means the security should not rely on perimeter defense or trust assumptions, but rather operate under the assumption that the network is already compromised and monitor for anomalies and threats continuously. This enables faster detection and response and improves the resilience of the security posture. For example, using behavioral analytics and threat intelligence to identify and block malicious activities, and applying automation and orchestration to streamline incident response. Now question. Can you think of technical examples of how these principles could be implemented? With every video, every topic, please try to think, imagine on how you can do something. Verify explicitly. Conditional access is a great example, and we will discuss it in another video. Least privilege. Some examples are mentioned on the slide, but privileged identity management, or PIM, is a great example, or just-in-time virtual machine access with Defender for Cloud. Assume breach, also known as assume compromise. A great example is what we typically do in networking with virtual networks in Azure subnets by controlling traffic by using network security groups. And those are layers of compartmentalization where we can reduce the blast radius, sealing off a network segment to contain it to avoid further spread. Next to the three principles, there's technology pillars we will use in Zero Trust. 6 of them. Next to the principles, there are 6 architectural concepts, pillars that help us focus on specific aspects that require attention. These pillars are identity, endpoints, data, apps, infrastructure, and network. And there is another element that brings all these pillars together. I think of this as a 7th element or 7th pillar. The one that glues together all the other ones, the other 6. And that's the element where we get visibility and automation and orchestration that will help us control the other pillars. Enriching our knowledge, helping us to feed other decisions, and driving automation and orchestration patterns. To put things into perspective, I have some presentation materials to help. The graphic we are using here is from the Microsoft Cybersecurity Reference Architecture, the MCRA. That's a great resource to support your learning. In the series of videos, there's a separate video on the MCRA, so I will not explain it here. I will borrow a couple of graphics from it. First, we see an overall overview. We see the pillars from Zero Trust represented in the graphic, and in blue there's an orchestration and control element. In the next graphic, we add some more detail to the different aspects. Information like adding telemetry and logging that can help us drive a decision. From a Zero Trust architecture perspective, then we have a graphic that also shows where certain products and services in the portfolio could fit in to be of help in providing more information or help with providing more controls. Many of these have been created to help with a certain aspect of Zero Trust or to help with the bigger picture. From an exam perspective, you will benefit from getting to know these products better to understand what they do and how they could be leveraged, and they will get exposure in other videos in the series. So now we have an idea about the concept of Zero Trust, but how could we go about and make it so? How to implement? As you can imagine, you would not be the first nor the last to ask that question. And Microsoft has been gathering great information about implementing Zero Trust and has made it available on a dedicated set of web pages on Microsoft Learn. The link to that is aka.ms/ZT guide. You see it on the slide. Through those pages, you will find excellent information on what to do and where to start. There are actually also examples for zero trust, to apply zero trust to specific services, such as Azure, Microsoft 365 or Copilots. Go and check it out and go start applying. But in this video, we will focus on the main body of knowledge when it comes to applying and deploying zero trust, based on advisories you will find on the webpage. We start here with Identity Zero Trust deployment objectives. Overall, we will have 3 primary and 3 secondary objectives. Primary are things that need to be done as soon as possible, and secondary are things that can be done a little bit later. And this pattern of primary and secondary objectives is repeated for every architectural pillar. We will look at some of the pillars, but you need to investigate the primaries and secondaries a bit by yourself. So here we see the identity one. And if we move to the next one, we see applications, where essentially we need to know what applications exist in an organization and how they are used. And that will drive other decisions. We are first establishing visibility and leveraging the information to start driving yet other decisions. If we look at data, know your data. Know what it represents, where it is, and where you actually would like it to go. And without proper classification, we do not know what is important and what not. We may be protecting something that is not so important and not protecting enough of what is important. Understanding data, what it is, and being able to label it is crucial. If you look at endpoints, endpoints are usually the places where users interact. Examples are telephones, laptops, but we also need to consider any other endpoint device. Think about Internet of Things, operational technology, for example. We need to know what devices are there, how we can get information from endpoints, and then how we can start making access decisions and how to safeguard these endpoints. When it's about infrastructure, what is that? Well, what is infrastructure in general? Typically, we use the term for platforms like Azure, AWS, GCP. It's elements like platform as a service structures, public cloud, but also private cloud. The things that make up a workload, Kubernetes, storage accounts, functions, database containers, etc. Do we know what we have? Do we have insights? Do we have control mechanisms? Networks, similar. What do we have? How is it connected? Can we segment? And do we have controls? Elements that will help us do isolation. For example, in case of an incident, think of a bulkhead pattern where we can seal off an impacted segment to limit further spreading. And then we tie it all together. It's not an official term, but I think of the overall element that binds everything together as the umbrella. This umbrella will let us weave everything together to have information, visibility that will drive decisions for further modernizing the access controls. The more attention we have accounted for in the pillars, the more visibility we will have overall. The more we can understand and make decisions to allow or disallow. Information feeds our appetite to get better at implementing zero trust. Back to the simplified overview. Get familiar with these pillars and with the overall glue and visibility, automation, orchestration, and start doing that. I often think of an orchestra, and we have amazing independent instruments, but we need to make them work together. Or if you're maybe more a sports fan, we have amazing players, but we just need to make sure they play together and play well to win another match. Now, how to get started? Some tips. How to get started, where to start. There is no good single answer to that. Get started somewhere and you will get visibility. That will help to understand and drive your next move. Look for what is happening in your organization and look for a project, program, or maybe even an incident that you could leverage to grow on modernizing access controls. Grow on completing the principles and architectural pillars of zero trust. Some specific guidance. Look for an opportunity, maybe based on existing guidance from the Zero Trust implementation guide pages. And there's 2 examples of that here. On the implementation guide pages, you will find modernization plan for zero trust in general, but also plans based on something that is much more specific, a certain service or product. Maybe your organization has started or is thinking about using Copilot. Use that momentum to make sure zero trust aspects get covered. Use the guidance. We're now coming to an end for this video. What we discussed is zero trust. What is it? How to find more information and how to apply principles. An important task for us as cybersecurity architects is to weave the principles and pillars into our designs and to validate if all the aspects of zero trust are catered for in an environment. And if not, then start improving. If they are, there is always room for improvement and there's always more. For more information, use the training materials for the Cybersecurity Architect certification on Microsoft Learn. Much of the content there on Zero Trust is based on the information you can easily access through the short links listed on this presentation. Now, thank you for watching the video. I trust that you have learned something today from the video and hope you will continue your learning journey by watching other videos in the Cybersecurity Architect series. Goodbye for now, and please stay secure.